During my sister Lily's birthday party, I was standing in the glittering dining hall of an upscale restaurant in Seattle, surrounded by chandeliers clinking glasses and the hollow laughter of relatives who had never once truly cared for me. My name is Rachel Carter. I am 35 years old, a high school teacher, and a mother to an 8-year-old boy named Ethan. That evening, I had convinced myself to attend, even though every instinct screamed to stay away. The air smelled of roasted lamb and expensive wine, but underneath it all was a current of tension so thick it made my stomach churn. Lily sat at the center of the long table in a crimson dress, her perfect curls shining under the light, her hand entwined with Jason Blackwell, the man she had chosen to parade as her fiancé, despite his reputation for violence. My parents, Harold and Vivian, sat close by their eyes, cutting toward me every few seconds with an expression that was neither welcoming nor warm. I raised the glass of wine in my hand because that was what everyone else was doing. In that moment, as I lifted it toward my lips, the waiter leaned down, his voice barely above a whisper, his breath quick against my ear. "Do not drink the wine, it is poisoned." My body froze, the stem of the glass slick with sweat from my palm. For a second, I thought I had misheard, but the look in his eyes told me it was real. Miguel, the young waiter who had served our table all night, was pale and trembling, his jaw tight, as if he was risking everything by telling me. My heartbeat thundered, echoing in my head like a drum. The laughter around me, blurred voices of uncles and cousins, became background noise. All I could hear was the sharp hiss of his warning. Poisoned. My throat tightened, and the glass felt like a loaded gun aimed directly at me. I glanced at Lily, who was watching me with a smile that was just a little too sharp, her eyes glittering with something darker than joy. Beside her, Jason tapped his fingers impatiently against the table, his knuckles raw, his expression unreadable but predatory. Across from them, my father Harold leaned back in his chair, proud and looming, while my mother Vivian folded her manicured hands, as if she were the picture of elegance. Yet both of them kept stealing glances at my glass. In that instant, it hit me with brutal clarity. Someone at this table, maybe all of them, wanted me dead. I forced my hand to tremble as if nervous from the attention, then pretended to sip while tilting the glass just enough that the wine brushed my lips, but never entered my mouth. The liquid shimmered a deep red, too innocent in its beauty. I lowered the glass slowly and set it near the centerpiece, praying that no one noticed. Miguel straightened quickly, moving away to serve another guest, leaving me with the cold terror of realization. I was a target. My vision tunneled every laugh and every clink of silverware, sounding like mockery. I tried to keep my breathing steady, but my chest tightened with panic. 1,000 questions ripped through my mind. Why me? Why now? Why at my sister's birthday? Was it about the inheritance my grandfather left, the one that had been a subject of whispered fights for months? Or was it punishment for daring to live my own life outside their control? My stomach twisted, and a wave of nausea swept over me, though I had not even swallowed a drop. I could smell the bitter tang of the wine, acrid and dangerous, as if the glass itself wanted to betray me. I leaned back in my chair, forcing a smile, trying to mask the storm raging inside. My eyes darted to the bouquet of roses standing tall in the center of the table. With a subtle motion, I switched my glass, pouring a small stream into the vase. Moments later, the petals nearest the liquid began to curl and blacken. My breath caught in my throat. Proof. The wine was not wine at all. It was death dressed up in crystal. I forced myself to sit still, my fingers gripping the edge of the chair until they ached. A scream wanted to rip from my chest, but I bit it down. If I exposed myself too early, I would have nothing but fear and accusations. If I played along, I might uncover the truth. Across the table, Lily's smile widened as though she had already written me out of existence. My father's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. My mother's face softened into false sympathy. Jason leaned in close to Lily, whispering something that made them both smirk. Every instinct told me I was standing on the edge of a cliff, that one wrong move would send me plummeting. And yet beneath the terror, something else stirred. Anger. A fury as sharp as the poison they tried to slip past my lips. They thought I was weak. They thought I would bend and break like always. They had no idea that I was about to fight back with everything I had. That night, as I sat with a poisoned glass inches from my hand, I made a silent vow. I would find out who planned my death. I would expose them, and I would not stop until justice was carved into their lives as brutally as they had tried to carve the end of mine. My name is Rachel Carter, and I am 35 years old. By day, I am a high school English teacher in the suburbs of Seattle, standing in front of classrooms filled with restless teenagers teaching them about symbolism and metaphor, and trying to convince them that words can save their lives. By night, I am just a mother raising my son Ethan alone in a modest apartment on the second floor of a weathered brick building, doing my best to keep him safe from the shadow of the family I was born into. People who see me at the grocery store with my reusable bags or at school events think my life is ordinary, even quiet. They see a woman with tired eyes, but a gentle smile. Someone who works too hard but still finds time to bake cookies for her son's class. What they do not see is the history of bruises that never made it into police reports, the sting of words that still echo in my mind, and the constant fear that my family's reach will never truly loosen its grip on me. My father, Harold, is a man carved out of stone, towering and unyielding. When I was a child, his voice was a thunderclap that could reduce me to silence in seconds. He believed control was love, discipline was protection, and obedience was the only path to worth. When I was 15 and dared to question him about why Lily always received new clothes, while mine were secondhand, he struck me across the face so hard that my lips split open. My mother, Vivian, pressed ice against it that night, whispering that I should not have provoked him, that it was my fault for not knowing when to keep quiet. She called it care, but it was gaslighting, twisting my reality until I believed I deserved every punishment. My sister Lily, younger than me by 5 years, was the golden child in every sense. Where I was criticized, she was praised. Where I was silenced, she was encouraged. At family dinners, Harold would brag about Lily's straight A's, while reminding me that I was lucky to even be allowed at the table. Vivian bought her expensive dresses, while telling me that plain clothes suited my plain personality. I learned early that in our house love was conditional, and I never met the conditions. Yet the one person who ever looked at me with fairness was my grandfather, George Carter. He was a retired naval officer turned small business owner, a man whose hands were calloused from labor, but whose voice softened when he spoke to me. He would slip me old books and say, "Rachel, never let anyone convince you that your worth is measured by obedience or money. When you feel like drowning, remember that truth is the only rope worth holding. He died 6 months ago, and with him went the only shield I ever had. Since then, the family has descended into chaos, fighting over his estate like vultures over carrion." I tried to stay away, but they insisted I come citing duty and appearances, dragging me into meetings with lawyers, where Harold's eyes cut into me with suspicion, as if my very existence threatened his claim. Lily flourished in the spotlight of being his favorite, even in death, while Jason Blackwell, her fiancé, with a jawline like a weapon, and fists that had already broken too many jaws in bar fights, began circling our family like a hawk. Vivian smiled sweetly through it all, telling me I was paranoid whenever I raised concern. They wanted me silent, compliant, erased. I stayed because of Ethan. I wanted him to know his mother was not weak, that we do not let bullies write our story. But the truth is that every phone call from my parents sent my chest tightening with dread. Every invitation, like tonight's birthday party, felt like a trap disguised as tradition. I wore a navy blue dress tonight that I bought on clearance applied makeup with a shaky hand, and told myself I could endure a few hours of their scorn for the sake of peace. Instead, I found myself holding a glass of poisoned wine. Now, as I sit at the table pretending to smile, the weight of my past presses against me, like invisible hands around my throat. I see Harold's calculating glare, Vivian's polished mask, Lily's smirk, and Jason's restless fists. I remember the blows, the cutting words, the nights I cried into my pillow, the mornings I forced myself to rise anyway. They think I am still that girl, voiceless and afraid. But they are wrong. My grandfather once told me that the true battle of life is not surviving storms, but learning to turn them against those who create them. Tonight, his words burn inside me like fire. Tonight, I know I am not just fighting for survival. I am preparing for war. When I think back to the house where I grew up, I do not remember warmth or safety. I remember silence so heavy it could crush your chest and rules so sharp they cut like glass. Harold Carter ran our home like a military barracks. Every word an order, every mistake a crime. I was 15 the first time he struck me with his belt, the sting burning across my back because I had forgotten to fold the laundry in the exact order he demanded. I remember the carpet against my cheek as I lay there, tears streaming, and Vivian's voice floating above me, calm and cold, telling me it was for my own good, that I needed to learn discipline. That was her gift, turning cruelty into care, making me question whether the pain was something I had brought upon myself. Lily sat on the couch that night holding a new necklace, her eyes wide with both fear and relief that it was me and not her. That was the pattern. Harold raised his voice at me until my ears rang while Lily received gifts. He told me I was worthless while she was told she would inherit the world. Vivian played mediator with her sugary tone. But when the doors were closed, she was the one who whispered that I should stop being jealous, that Lily deserved more, because she was special, because she was everything I was not. I grew up believing that my role in the family was not to be loved, but to absorb the blows, to carry the shame, so Lily could shine untouched. Even outside those walls, the control followed me. At 16, when I wanted to join a writing club after school, Harold forbade it, saying creativity was useless. When I protested, he slammed his fist on the table so hard the dishes rattled and ordered me upstairs without dinner. Vivian brought me a slice of bread later and told me I needed to stop provoking him if I wanted peace. That word peace became twisted in my mind. It meant silent submission, swallowing the screams that clawed at my throat. Lily, meanwhile, was paraded through recitals and award ceremonies, Harold's arm around her shoulder, Vivian clapping proudly. Every time I looked at them, I felt invisible, erased. The only reprieve I ever had was my grandfather George. He lived in a small house a few blocks away, and on weekends I would escape there under the pretense of helping him with chores. He would hand me old naval manuals and battered novels telling me that knowledge was armor no one could strip away. I can still see him sitting in his recliner, pipe smoke curling in the air, telling me, "Rachel, you are not the weak one. You are the strong one because you endure." But endurance has a cost. By the time I turned 18, I had bruises on my arms that I covered with long sleeves and scars on my heart that no makeup could conceal. I left home for college with nothing but a suitcase and a scholarship, swearing I would never let them control me again. But blood has a way of chaining you back. When Grandfather George died 6 months ago, the chain tightened. He had built a modest empire through decades of work, rental properties, and savings that added up to a fortune. Rumors of his will spread like wildfire, each family meeting turning into a battlefield. Harold spoke in cold numbers about what was owed. Vivian played the conciliator, while her eyes gleamed with calculation. Lily acted entitled, as though the money already belonged to her, and Jason Blackwell loomed at her side, like an enforcer waiting for command. I tried to stay away. I tried to tell them I did not care about the money, but Harold insisted that as a daughter I had to be present. At one meeting in their dining room, Harold jabbed a finger in my face and said, "You think you can hide behind your teaching job and your pathetic apartment, but this family is about legacy, and if you stand in the way, you will regret it." Vivian touched my arm lightly afterward and murmured that he was only stressed that I should not take it personally. But the message was clear. I was no longer just the scapegoat, I was an obstacle. The memory of that night burns in me as I sit at Lily's birthday table now. The forced laughter, the clink of glasses, the poisoned wine, it all feels like the inevitable climax of years of cruelty. I can still hear my grandfather's voice warning me in his gentle way that greed can turn kin into predators. He saw it coming even before I did. And as I look at Lily across the table, her smile brittle, Jason's hand squeezing her waist possessively, Harold's glare piercing Vivian's eyes, shimmering with false tears, I realize that the abuse of my childhood has mutated into something deadlier. No longer just words or bruises, now it is poison in my cup. They want me silenced, permanently erased, not just from family photos, but from existence. For a moment, fear surges through me. Memories of the belt, the fists, the gaslighting words. But then something harder takes root. I survived that house. I survived being broken down to nothing. And I am still here. If they think poison will end me, they have underestimated the strength that their cruelty built. The flashbacks of pain sharpen into resolve a blade I can finally wield. Tonight will not be the night they bury me. It will be the night I begin to bury their lies. The room buzzed with laughter as Lily's friends gathered around to sing their voices, weaving together in a hollow chorus that only sharpened the dread pounding in my veins. I sat with the poisoned glass before me, the roses in the vase already curling and browning from the few drops I had poured, and I knew without doubt that Miguel's warning had been true. My hands were clammy, my breath shallow, and every instinct screamed at me to bolt from the room to grab Ethan from the babysitter and disappear forever. But I forced myself to stay still to play my part in the theater of family affection. I glanced sideways and caught Harold watching me from the head of the table, his lips barely moving as he muttered something to Vivian. She nodded once, her eyes flicking to my glass with the precision of a sniper. Lily leaned forward, her red lips parted in a smile that was almost predatory, whispering something into Jason's ear. He chuckled darkly, his hand tightening around the stem of his own glass. It was not just paranoia anymore. It was evidence. Someone had tampered with my drink, someone sitting no more than a few feet away, and their plan had been for me to swallow death in front of 100 witnesses. A convenient tragedy, a toast gone wrong, a sister collapsing at a party. They would grieve publicly while privately celebrating the removal of the inconvenient daughter, the scapegoat, the one who stood in the way of their hunger for George Carter's estate. I pressed my lips together, tasting the faint trace of bitterness where the poisoned wine had brushed them. Even that tiny contact made my throat itch as if it were burning. The thought that a full sip could have ended me sent a violent shiver down my spine. I clutched my napkin hard enough to tear the fabric, forcing myself not to break the facade. If I exposed myself too soon, they would deny everything, paint me as paranoid, hysterical, unhinged. They had done it all my life. Gaslighting was their favorite weapon. No, I needed more than instinct and wilted roses. I needed proof so undeniable that even their slick lies could not wash it away. I caught Miguel's eye across the room, his face pale, his tray trembling slightly as he refilled water glasses. He gave the smallest nod, a silent promise that he had seen what they tried to do. That sliver of solidarity steadied me, a reminder that I was not completely alone in this war. Still, my chest tightened with terror as I realized how far they were willing to go. Poison was not an act of impulse. It was premeditated, deliberate cold. Someone had planned this for days, if not weeks, and they had chosen tonight, Lily's birthday, to stage my exit. The symbolism was not lost on me. One daughter celebrated, the other eliminated. My stomach turned with rage. I thought of Ethan, his small hands gripping mine as he asked if I would be home in time to read him a story. I thought of his laugh, the way he looked at me like I was his entire world. If I had sipped that wine, if I had collapsed at this table, he would have been left to grow up with the narrative that his mother had died in a tragic accident. He would have been at the mercy of Harold and Vivian's poisonous influence, perhaps even taken in by Lily and Jason. The idea of my son growing up in the same cage I had escaped made my blood boil. No, I whispered to myself. Not again. Not ever. I pressed my palms flat on the table to stop them from shaking and forced myself to smile when Lily raised her glass in a toast. To family, she announced, her voice dripping with irony. Everyone echoed her words, glasses clinking wine, shimmering red as blood. I lifted my own, but did not drink, holding it just high enough to appear compliant. Their eyes darted toward me, checking, calculating. Harold's brow furrowed, as if irritated that I was still upright. Vivian's fingers tapped nervously against the stem of her glass. Jason smirked as if savoring a private joke. Lily's smile widened, brittle but hungry. In that moment, I saw them for what they truly were: not family, but predators dressed in fine clothes. They had orchestrated my death as casually as one might plan a dinner menu. My heart pounded against my ribs, sweat pooling at the back of my neck. but I forced myself to play along. I laughed when others laughed. I clapped when Lily opened gifts, all while keeping the poisoned glass untouched. Each minute felt like a lifetime. Each glance from Harold like the brush of a knife against my skin. The realization hit me like ice water. This was not the end of their plan. It was only the beginning. If poison failed, they would try again. They would not stop until I was gone. That certainty both terrified me and sharpened my resolve. I thought of my grandfather's voice, steady and wise, telling me that courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to bow to it. I straightened my shoulders, masking the fury rising in me. If they wanted me dead, I would give them something else instead. I would give them the illusion of victory, the belief that they had succeeded. And when their guard was down, when they were drunk on their own triumph, I would strike with proof so damning that no lie could save them. The petals of the poisoned roses drooped further black veins, spreading across their surface, silent witnesses to the crime. I glanced at them once more, feeling my pulse steady. Tonight, they tried to end me. But tonight was also the night I chose to fight back. After the party ended, I walked out into the cold Seattle night, with the poisoned glass still burning in my memory, my body taut as a drawn bow. The restaurant parking lot glistened with rain neon lights from nearby bars, reflecting in puddles, and my heels clicked against the asphalt like a countdown to war. Miguel followed at a distance, his apron stuffed into a plastic bag, his eyes darting nervously as if he expected someone to leap out of the shadows. I turned to him under a flickering street lamp and hissed a question that came out sharper than intended. Who put it in my drink? His throat worked as he swallowed, glancing around before leaning close. I saw him. Jason slipped something from his pocket when he thought no one was looking. He leaned over your glass while you were hugging your aunt. I tried to stop him, but he glared at me. I knew if I said anything inside, they would fire me, or worse. My stomach twisted, but the confirmation hit with brutal clarity. Jason Lily's fiancé, the thug with a record of bar fights and assault, had tried to kill me in plain sight. I should not have been surprised. He had always looked at me like prey, his gaze lingering too long, his smirk full of threat. Yet hearing it aloud solidified the nightmare. Miguel gripped my arm, his hand trembling. "You cannot go back to them alone, Miss Carter. They will try again." The sincerity in his eyes reminded me of my students of the quiet kids who only spoke when they trusted someone enough to listen. I nodded slowly, my voice low. "Thank you, Miguel. You just saved my life." But saving was only the first step. Now, I needed proof. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a number I had not dialed in years. Detective Anna Morales. We had shared cramped dorm rooms in college, late nights of study sessions and laughter, before life pulled us in different directions. She had gone on to the police academy while I had gone into teaching. But I never forgot the steadiness in her eyes, the way she believed in truth like a religion. The phone rang twice before she answered, her voice brisk. "Rachel Carter, I never thought I would hear from you again." "What's wrong?" My throat tightened, words catching like splinters, but I forced them out. "They tried to poison me tonight, at my sister's birthday." The wine was laced. There was silence, heavy and disbelieving, then the sharp intake of breath. "Are you safe? Where are you?" "I'm outside the restaurant." Miguel, the waiter, saw Jason do it. "But if I call it in now, they will deny everything. They will say I am paranoid. They always do." "I need more than suspicion, Anna. I need them exposed." Morales' voice hardened into the tone I remembered from our youth when she had confronted bullies twice her size. "Rachel, if this is true, you need to file a report. Poisoning is attempted murder." But I could hear the hesitation under her steel. She knew as well as I did that without irrefutable evidence, Harold's money and influence could twist the narrative, turn me into the crazy daughter who imagined threats. My voice dropped, desperate but controlled. "Anna, please, help me set a trap. You always said justice needs proof. Let's get it." A sigh carried across the line, weary but resolute. "You are insane, Rachel. But fine. If you want to play this dangerous game, I will watch your back. Just promise me you will not take reckless risks." Relief washed over me, though fear still coiled tight in my gut. Miguel shifted beside me, his hands shoved into his pockets, waiting for my decision. I looked at both of them, one on the phone, one under the flickering light, and realized I had allies now, small, but enough to begin. We planned quickly, voices, low eyes scanning the night. Miguel agreed to keep serving my family if asked to observe quietly to slip me information when he could. Morales promised to pull Jason's record to track his finances to station plainclothes officers near upcoming family meetings. I would play the dutiful daughter, the obedient sister, all while collecting every shred of evidence they left behind. For the first time in years, I felt the faint spark of control return to my hands, but with it came danger. The memory of Harold's glare, Vivian's whispers, Lily's brittle smile, Jason's smirk. They were not just family, they were predators circling. And predators struck hardest when they sensed their prey was slipping away. As I drove home through slick streets, Ethan's sleeping face waiting for me, I knew this was only the beginning. The poison in the glass had not killed me, but it had awakened something far more dangerous than fear. It had awakened the part of me that refused to be their victim any longer. The next week unfolded like a stage play where every actor knew their role except me, and the script was written in shadows. Harold called me 3 times in 2 days, his voice gruff but carrying a thin veneer of concern. He asked if I was eating well, if Ethan needed anything, if I planned to come to Lily's house for Sunday dinner. Each question was delivered in tones that might have fooled an outsider, but I heard the unspoken command behind them, the old blade of control sliding back into my ribs. When I didn't answer immediately, he snapped Rachel. You always make things more difficult than they have to be. Why can't you just be part of this family without causing drama? I murmured something non-committal and hung up my fingers shaking. Vivian showed up at my door the following afternoon, clutching a casserole dish with a smile that stretched too wide. She kissed Ethan's cheek and told him he was her favorite grandson, then turned to me with eyes that glittered like glass. Darling, you've looked pale. Maybe you should take a little rest, maybe skip school for a week. I can help with Ethan. You know, I would love to. Her tone was syrupy, but my gut twisted. Rest meant sedation, silence, absence. Help meant taking Ethan from me under the guise of love. I thanked her stiffly, refusing the dish, and watched her eyes narrow before she left her perfume lingering like smoke after a fire. By Friday, Lily invited me to her apartment under the pretense of planning memorial details for our grandfather. Against my better judgment, I went needing to maintain the facade. The moment I stepped through the door, I knew it was a mistake. Jason lounged in an armchair, his muscles taut under his shirt, his smile lazy and cruel. Lily poured wine. This time I refused, setting the glass untouched on the counter, and she immediately scoffed. What is wrong with you, Rachel? Ever since the party, you've been acting paranoid. Do you really think anyone here would hurt you? Jason chuckled, leaning forward. Yeah, Rachel, you really think we're that stupid? His voice dripped with mockery, but his eyes glittered with menace. I stayed silent, knowing any denial would be twisted against me. Then Lily exploded, slamming her glass down so hard, red liquid splashed across the table. You always do this, always make yourself the victim. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to have a sister who invents tragedies just to get attention? My chest burned with fury. Memories of her childhood taunts resurfacing the way she used to smirk while Harold punished me. Jason stood suddenly crossing the room in 2 strides. He leaned so close I could smell the bitterness of beer on his breath. You're lucky you've got a kid, Rachel. Otherwise, you'd already be gone. The threat was raw, unvarnished, a blade pressed to my throat in words. Lily did not flinch. She just sipped her wine and watched. I grabbed my coat, heart pounding, forcing my legs not to run until I was outside in the cold. My phone buzzed immediately. Morales. I ducked into an alley, whispering details while my hands trembled. She cursed under her breath, told me to file a report immediately. But I hesitated. Without recordings, it would be my word against theirs, the same battle I had fought since childhood. Gaslighting was their domain. If I accused them now, they would say I was unstable, that stress from teaching and single motherhood had broken me. They would smear me in court and try to take Ethan. Morales sighed but promised she would dig deeper, find Jason's financial trails, anything to anchor my story in fact. That night when I returned home, I found my front door ajar, though I knew I had locked it. Inside, Ethan's toys were scattered drawers half open. Nothing of value was missing. But on my kitchen table sat my favorite mug shattered into pieces, and beside it a note in Harold's familiar blocky handwriting. "Stop fighting us. Accept your place or lose everything." My knees buckled and I pressed a hand to the counter to keep from collapsing. They had been in my home in the only sanctuary I had, and they had left a message not just for me, but for Ethan. Fear and rage braided together until I could hardly breathe. I swept the shards of the mug into a bag, snapped photos of the note, and sent them to Morales immediately. She called within minutes, her voice tight with anger. "This is breaking and entering. This is intimidation. We're building a case, Rachel, but you need to stay strong. Stay visible. If they think you're scared into silence, they've already won." Her words echoed my grandfather's wisdom. Courage is refusing to bow. I hugged Ethan that night tighter than ever, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. But my resolve hardened like steel. If they wanted to gaslight me, to break me, to erase me with poison threats and lies, they had underestimated the girl who survived Harold's fists and Vivian's whispers. They had underestimated the mother who would burn the world before letting her son inherit her chains. I kissed Ethan's forehead and watched him sleep, then sat in the dark with a notebook open planning. The next move had to be mine, and this time it would not be survival. It would be retaliation. The following days blurred into a haze of fear, sharpened into strategy, every moment spent juggling the mask of normalcy at school and home while secretly preparing a war that would either free me or destroy me. Morales came to my apartment late one night, her badge tucked away, her hair pulled into a severe knot that made her look less like the college friend I once knew and more like the hardened detective she had become. She spread files across my kitchen table, photographs of Jason meeting with men in parking lots, bank records, showing sudden cash withdrawals, even a blurry image of him passing an envelope to a tattooed thug outside a dive bar. But as damning as it looked, she shook her head. "It's circumstantial, Rachel. In court, Harold's lawyers will say Jason was paying off gambling debts, not arranging murder. They will say your paranoia makes you imagine threats. We need more." Her words echoed the constant refrain of my life. More always, more proof before anyone would believe me. I stared at the wilted roses I had preserved in a plastic bag, their black veins stark against the pale petals, silent evidence of poison. But even those could be dismissed as coincidence, without a chain of custody. My fingers clenched around the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. Then an idea sparked, reckless but searingly clear. What if we don't wait for them to try again? What if we let them think they succeeded? Morales's brows furrowed, suspicion flaring. "What are you talking about?" I took a breath, tasting both terror and determination. "They want me dead. So let's give them their wish, a staged poisoning. A performance so convincing it will draw them out into the open, force their greed to expose itself." Morales leaned back, exhaling sharply. "That's insane. If word leaks, you'll be the one charged with fraud. And your son, Rachel, what about Ethan?" My throat tightened at his name, but I forced myself to speak steady. "That's why it has to work. If I do nothing, they'll keep circling, waiting for another chance. If I die in their eyes, if they think I'm gone, their masks will fall. They'll celebrate, they'll move on the inheritance, they'll make mistakes." Morales pressed her palms together, weighing the risk like scales. Finally, she said, her voice low, "If we do this, it has to be airtight. No leaks. Only me, only you, maybe one or two medics I trust. And you understand, Rachel, if you misstep, you might not walk away." I nodded, heart hammering, but the decision had already lodged in me like steel. For Ethan, I would take the risk. We spent hours mapping details, our voices hushed over the spread of files. Morales would arrange for a trusted ER doctor to prepare medical compounds that mimicked organ failure without causing lasting harm. A paramedic team would be on standby, briefed to act the part of frantic responders when the moment came. Miguel, still shaken but resolute, agreed to slip me the tainted glass in public at the next family gathering, this time with harmless chemicals prepared by Morales's contact. I would drink collapse and be whisked away in an ambulance, while my family watched, believing their plan had worked. Then, hidden in a secure hospital room, I would watch them unravel on camera, every word, every gesture finally documented as evidence. The mechanics of it all felt like writing a play, one in which my life was both the script and the stage. But beneath the logistics burned the raw pulse of fear. Could I really let Ethan believe, even briefly, that his mother was gone? Could I put him through the agony of loss just to expose the truth? Morales must have seen the doubt flicker in my eyes, because she reached across the table and gripped my hand, her calloused fingers grounding me. Listen to me, if you don't end this now, they will try again. And next time maybe Ethan is in the car with you, maybe he's at the house when Jason breaks in. Do this for him. The words sliced me open because I knew she was right. My son deserved a mother who fought back, not one who folded under fear. I closed my eyes, hearing my grandfather's voice in memory. The true measure of courage is what you're willing to risk for those you love. When I opened them, my decision was final. We set the stage for the following Saturday, when Vivian had invited the family for what she called a reconciliation dinner. I almost laughed at the irony. The same table where they had planned my erasure would now become the stage for their own exposure. As Morales packed up her files, she paused at the door, her silhouette etched by the hallway light. Just remember, Rachel, once this begins, you can't turn back. You have to go all the way. I stood in the quiet after she left, staring at the darkened roses in the bag, and whispered to the empty room, I will. For Ethan, I will. Saturday arrived cloaked in gray clouds, the kind of weather that made the city feel like it was holding its breath. And as I dressed for Vivian's so-called reconciliation dinner, my hands trembled so badly, I dropped the clasp of my necklace twice before fastening it. Ethan was spending the night at a trusted neighbor's house, his backpack packed with books and his stuffed bear. And as I kissed his forehead goodbye, I whispered a promise he couldn't understand, but that burned like fire in my chest. Mommy is coming back stronger than ever. My drive to my parents' house felt endless. Every red light a chance to turn around, every street lamp flashing across my windshield like a silent warning. But I forced myself forward until the familiar iron gate loomed ahead, its bars black against the sky. Inside, the house glowed with warmth that felt false laughter spilling from the open windows, the sound of clinking glass echoing like a funeral bell. Vivian met me at the door, her lips painted a smile too bright, her perfume thick and suffocating. Darling, I'm so glad you came, she said, pressing a kiss to my cheek that felt like a brand. Harold stood in the foyer with a whiskey in hand, his eyes sweeping over me with cold appraisal, as if measuring whether I was still strong enough to be dangerous. Lily was in the dining room arranging silverware with Jason at her side, his hand sliding over her waist possessively, his eyes cutting to me with that same smirk of anticipation I had seen the night of the party. The table gleamed under the chandelier candles, flickering wine bottles already breathing on the sideboard. My stomach twisted at the sight, but I forced my expression to remain neutral, even gracious, as if I had accepted Vivian's invitation in good faith. Miguel moved silently in the background, in a borrowed waiter's uniform, his jaw tight, his tray steady despite the storm in his eyes. When he passed me, he gave the smallest nod, a signal that the plan was in motion, that the glass he would place in front of me would hold not death, but the compounds. Morales had secured a chemical cocktail that would mimic collapse without ending my life. I sat the room buzzing with brittle cheer, and Harold raised his glass. To family, he intoned the same words Lily had used at her party, and I nearly choked on the irony. Glasses clinked, laughter swelled. And then Miguel placed mine before me, the deep red surface gleaming like a pool of blood. My heart thundered in my ears. As I lifted it, the weight of the moment pressing down like a stone. This was it. There would be no turning back. I glanced once at Vivian, whose eyes shone with something sharp, and hungry at Harold, whose jaw flexed as he waited at Lily, whose smile was brittle with expectation, and at Jason, whose smirk widened as he leaned back in his chair. Then I drank. The liquid slid over my tongue, bitter and metallic, a taste that made my stomach lurch, though I knew it was harmless, and I forced myself to swallow. I set the glass down with deliberate slowness, then let my body convulse as the chemical cocktail surged through me, tightening my throat, weakening my muscles. My breath hitched, my vision blurred, and I let myself collapse forward onto the table with a loud thud that sent silverware clattering. Gasps erupted around me, chairs scraping as everyone lurched to their feet. Vivian's hand flew to her mouth in feigned shock. Harold cursed under his breath. Jason muttered something sharp to Lily, who immediately pressed her hand to her chest as though devastated. Miguel shouted, "Call 911," his voice trembling with perfect panic, and within minutes the paramedics Morales had stationed were rushing in their uniforms, crisp, their movements precise. They checked my pulse, their hands firm but careful, and declared in grave tones, "Weak response possible, cardiac arrest. We need to move now." They strapped me onto a stretcher oxygen mask pressed to my face, and as they wheeled me past Harold, I caught a flicker in his eyes, not grief, but calculation, as if already thinking about the inheritance. Vivian's tears streamed down her face, but her shoulders trembled in a way that felt more like excitement than sorrow. Lily clung to Jason, who whispered something in her ear that made her lips curl into the faintest smile. I closed my eyes, letting the world fade into darkness, as the stretcher rolled out the sound of sirens rising to meet me. In the ambulance, hidden from view, Morales leaned over me, her expression fierce. "They bought it, Rachel. Every second of it." Her voice was steady, but I could see the flicker of fear in her eyes as she checked the monitors. The compounds were working, slowing my pulse to the edge of believability. My skin pale and clammy, my body limp. I felt like a ghost hovering between life and death, and in a way I was. When we reached the hospital, I was wheeled into a secure wing, doors locked, cameras positioned to feed directly to Morales' laptop, as the paramedics played their roles outside, whispering updates to my family. I lay still inside, every nerve vibrating with the knowledge that the real play was only beginning. Through the monitor, I watched as Vivian arrived first in the waiting room, her sobs loud enough to draw attention, but her eyes sharp as she whispered into Harold's ear. Harold's expression never wavered from grim stoicism, but his hand squeezed hers with a pressure that spoke of triumph. Jason paced the hallway, pulling out his phone, speaking in hushed tones. I could not hear, but that Morales' tech intercepted and recorded. Lily sat with her head bowed, but when she looked up, I saw the faintest smirk curve her lips. Watching them react not with genuine grief, but with barely concealed satisfaction, tore at me more than the chemicals flooding my veins. They thought I was gone, and in their minds the door to fortune had swung wide open. Morales pressed a hand to my shoulder. "You're seeing them for who they really are now. This is your proof." I closed my eyes, my chest rising shallowly under the mask, and whispered back, "Then let's finish it." The sterile white of the hospital walls hummed around me as the monitors beeped faintly, their signals altered by Morales' technician to mimic a patient lingering at death's door. I lay still, my body heavy from the compounds, while the true theater played out on the screens beside me. The cameras captured every angle of the waiting room, every flicker of expression on the faces of the people who had tried to erase me. Vivian sat closest to the door. Her tears dried, now her fingers interlaced tightly with Harold's. At first glance, they looked like grieving parents, but as Morales zoomed in, their lips moved in whispers that betrayed them. Vivian leaned close, her voice just audible over the directional mic. "It's done, Harold. She's gone." Harold's eyes hardened, his jaw flexing as he muttered, "Finally, no more obstacles. Tomorrow we call Wallace. The estate will be ours now." The words hit me like a blow to the chest. Not for their cruelty, I had expected that, but for their casual certainty, the way my death was simply a transaction. A box checked off their ledger. Morales glanced at me, her eyes grim but triumphant. "That's conspiracy in their own words." Jason paced like a caged animal, pulling out his phone every few minutes, muttering into it with a nervous edge. Morales' tech tapped into the line, and through the crackling speakers we heard him talking to an unknown contact. "It's done." She collapsed right at the table. "Should be dead by now. Yeah. I want the rest of the payment. Cash." The voice on the other end was muffled, but the words were enough to cement his role as executioner. not just pawn. Lily, meanwhile, sat in the corner, her head bowed as if in mourning. But the camera caught her reflection in the glass pane behind her, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her mouth, satisfaction blooming where grief should have been. My chest tightened, fury warring with sorrow. This was my family bound not by love but by greed, their humanity rotted away. I thought of Ethan's small hands, his laughter, the future they would have stolen from him without a second thought, and rage steadied me. Morales touched the earpiece in her ear, signaling to her undercover officers stationed just beyond the room. "Not yet," she murmured. "Let them keep talking. We need them to damn themselves further." Hours dragged by the waiting room, becoming a crucible of whispered plotting. Harold excused himself to step into the hallway, Morales' hidden camera catching him pulling out his phone. His voice was low but sharp. "Yes, she's gone. Arrange the paperwork with Wallace. No, don't delay. We need this wrapped before questions start." When he returned, Vivian smoothed his sleeve, her smile brittle with victory. Jason slumped into a chair, exhausted but smug, muttering Grandpa always liked her best. Now let's see if he likes her from the grave. The callousness made bile rise in my throat. Morales scribbled notes, every timestamp, every incriminating phrase. She leaned toward me, whispering fiercely, "With this, Rachel, they can't hide. This is more than enough for the DA." Still, I forced myself to stay still, to let the performance continue, because I knew predators often revealed their darkest truths when they believed the hunt was over. And then it happened. Lily's phone buzzed, and she answered quickly, her voice hushed but excited. "Yes, she's gone. You'll get your share soon, I promise. No, there's no risk. Everyone believes it." My blood ran cold. Another player in the wings, someone beyond the family circle pulling strings. Morales' jaw clenched as she signaled her tech to trace the call, eyes narrowing when the result popped up, a burner phone registered near the same dive bar Jason had frequented. The puzzle was snapping into place. Payments, poison pawns. My family hadn't just plotted against me. They had partnered with men who lived in the shadows of crime. This was no longer just family betrayal. It was organized conspiracy. Morales squeezed my shoulder. "We've got them. All of them." I swallowed, my throat raw from chemicals and fury. "Not yet. We ended at the will reading. Public, where they can't twist it." Her eyes widened slightly, but then she nodded, understanding. Justice wasn't just about evidence. It was about exposure. My parents, my sister Jason, they thrived on secrecy, on gaslighting, on painting me as the unstable one. To truly destroy their hold, the world had to see the truth unravel with their own eyes. So we waited. Morales compiled files, officers prepared warrants. Miguel prepared his sworn statement about the poisoned glass. I lay in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling, imagining Ethan's face, imagining the moment when my family's smirks would curdle into panic. That thought became my lifeline, and as dawn broke outside, spilling pale light through the blinds, I knew the trap was tightening like a noose. And this time they were the ones caught inside. The day of the will. Reading dawned cold and bright, the kind of brittle winter light that seems to strip everything bare. And as I walked up the marble steps of Henry Wallace's law office, my heart pounded with a rhythm that felt like war drums. For the city and for the press gathered outside, I was a ghost risen from the grave. News of my collapse at the Carter dinner had leaked whispers of my death filling gossip columns and neighborhood chatter. The cameras outside clicked frantically when they saw me, their shouts muffled by the thundering in my ears. But I kept walking, my black coat flowing behind me like the wings of judgment. Inside, the conference room gleamed with polished oak, a long table set with carafes of water and neat stacks of documents. My family was already there. Harold sat at the head of the table, his posture stiff with authority, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease when they landed on me. Vivian gasped audibly, her hand flying to her chest as though she'd seen a ghost. Lily's wineglass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the carpet, crimson liquid seeping into the fibers like blood. Jason froze mid-step, his mouth opening, then snapping shut, his face draining of color. "You," he stammered, his voice cracking. "You were supposed to be dead." I finished for him, my voice like ice. "Yes, Jason, I know. That was the plan, wasn't it? The room went silent, only the hiss of the heating vent filling the air. Henry Wallace, silver-haired and stern, cleared his throat and gestured to the projector. Before we begin the reading of Reginald Carter's will, there are matters that must be addressed. Rachel, would you like to proceed? My legs trembled, but I stepped forward, placing a black folder on the table with deliberate precision. My fingers shook as I flipped it open, revealing photographs, transcripts, USB drives, evidence. My voice, though low, cut through the room like a blade. I know what you tried to do. You poisoned my glass. You broke into my home. You threatened my life, all for money that was never yours to steal. Vivian shook her head rapidly, her voice trembling with rehearsed sorrow. Rachel, darling, you're confused. Grief is clouding your mind. Stop, I snapped, my voice rising. Don't you dare gaslight me again. Not here. Not now. I turned to Henry, who nodded and inserted the first USB into the laptop. The screen flickered to life, filling the wall with footage from the hospital waiting room. Vivian's voice rang out clear. It's done, Harold. She's gone. Harold's cold reply. Finally, no more obstacles. Tomorrow we call Wallace. Gasps filled the room from the distant relatives present, their faces pale with shock. Henry pressed play again, and Jason's recorded phone call spilled into the air. Yeah, I want the rest of the payment. Cash. Lily's whispered promise. You'll get your share soon, I promise. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the pounding of my own heartbeat. Vivian crumpled into her chair, her face draining of color, while Harold's fists clenched so tightly the veins stood out like ropes. Jason lunged forward, his voice hoarse. This is fake doctored, she's setting us up. Another click from Henry, and the next file played photographs of Jason handing an envelope to Vince Malone, the tattooed thug, followed by Malone's recorded confession in the bar. Your brother Jason Stone, he paid me $2,000 up front. The job was to cut your brakes, another $3,000 when you were gone. The words echoed like gunfire in the room. Lily let out a choked sob, but no one moved to comfort her. My eyes swept over them, my voice trembling with fury. You plotted to kill me, your own daughter, your sister, because you were too blinded by greed to see that Grandpa never meant for us to destroy each other. Henry closed the laptop and folded his hands, his expression grave. The evidence is overwhelming. Law enforcement has been briefed. At that moment, the conference room doors swung open and uniformed officers stepped inside their boots, heavy on the carpet. Gregory Carter, Vivian Carter, Jason Blackwell. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and related charges. Please stand. Harold surged to his feet, his face twisted with rage. You think you can take me down, Rachel? I built this family, His words cut off as the officer seized his arms, forcing his hands behind his back. Vivian wailed, her mascara streaking down her cheeks, but the officer's voice remained cold as steel. You have the right to remain silent. Jason tried to bolt for the door, but another officer blocked him, slamming him against the wall as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Lily sank into her chair, trembling, her face ashen, her glassy eyes darting to me with something between hatred and horror. You ruined everything, she whispered, her voice breaking. No, I said softly. I saved myself. The officers marched my family out, their protests fading into the hallway, and the room slowly exhaled. Relatives stared at me with wide eyes, some whispering prayers, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Henry placed a hand on my shoulder, his voice quiet. Reginald would be proud, Rachel. But pride was not what I felt. My chest was hollow, my heart heavy with the weight of ashes. I had survived, yes, but the price was the death of whatever fragments of family I had once clung to. Henry cleared his throat again and began to read the will. His voice was steady as he spoke of my grandfather's wishes, his desire for fairness, his hope that the inheritance would bring unity. But those hopes were already buried. By law, those convicted of crimes against another heir were disqualified. What had been meant for Harold, Vivian, and Lily would now pass to me. A fortune I had never sought now laid at my feet like chains of gold. I sat rigid, Ethan's face flashing in my mind, and realized the bitter irony. They had tried to kill me because they feared I would take everything. And in the end, by their own hands, they had ensured it. The weeks that followed felt like living inside a storm whose thunder rolled from courthouse steps, and news broadcasts each headline screaming my family's downfall into every living room in the city. Carter patriarch and wife charged in murder conspiracy. Jason Blackwell implicated in poison plot. The names that had once carried weight in business circles were now dragged through the mud, their faces splashed across tabloids, their legacies reduced to mugshots. I attended the trial not as a victim hidden in shadows, but as a witness, my voice steady as I recounted the poisoned glass, the break-in, the threats, the gaslighting that had shaped my entire childhood. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled with reporters and curious onlookers, the air thick with the scent of ink and sweat. Harold sat at the defense table in a gray suit that seemed too large for his shrinking frame. His once commanding posture now slumped. Vivian dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, but the tears never reached her carefully painted face. Jason's jaw flexed as he glared at me, but when the recording of his call to Vince Malone played, even he couldn't hold his smirk. Lily sat behind them, not in handcuffs, but pale as a ghost, her name whispered by prosecutors, though charges against her remained under review. Morales testified with calm authority, presenting the surveillance footage, the traced calls, the financial records that linked Jason directly to Malone. Miguel took the stand, his hands shaking as he described what he had seen at Lily's birthday, how he had watched Jason slip the vial into my glass. When my turn came, I walked slowly to the witness stand, my palms damp, my throat dry. The prosecutor asked me to describe what it felt like when I realized my family had tried to kill me. And for a moment I couldn't speak the words, caught like shards in my chest. But then I thought of Ethan, of the truth he deserved, and I forced the words out, each one a nail sealing my family's coffin. It felt, I said, like drowning in betrayal, like being erased by the people who gave me life. My voice cracked, but I didn't look away from Harold as I spoke. His jaw tightened, his knuckles white, but his eyes flickered with something I had never seen before: fear. After weeks of testimony, the verdict came swift and merciless. Guilty on all counts. Harold was sentenced to 30 years, Vivian to 20 for her complicity, and Jason to 40 for attempted murder and conspiracy. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, some gasping, others nodding grimly. I sat still, my heart both heavy and light, knowing justice had been carved into stone at last. Outside, the press swarmed, microphones shoved into my face, questions hurled like stones. How does it feel to see your family convicted? Will you keep the inheritance? Do you fear retaliation? I answered only once, my voice calm but firm. Justice isn't about money, it's about truth. And the truth is, they tried to kill me. That's all that matters. The cameras flashed, but I turned away, my hand gripping Ethan's as I led him past the chaos into the quiet of a waiting car. In the months that followed, the inheritance passed to me by law, vast properties and accounts that felt less like riches and more like relics of a legacy poisoned by greed. I sold most of it, using the money to establish the Carter Foundation for Survivors of Family Violence, a place where women and children could find refuge from the very kind of darkness I had endured. Reporters called me philanthropic brave, but the truth was simpler. I wanted Ethan to grow up seeing that the cycle of cruelty could be broken, that wealth could be used to heal rather than to destroy. Healing was not instant. At night, I still woke gasping, the memory of poison burning my throat, the image of Harold's glare seared into my mind. But each morning, Ethan's laughter pulled me back, his small hand in mine anchoring me to the present. Morales visited often, her smile tired but genuine, reminding me that survival wasn't just about outliving danger, but about rebuilding in its wake. Miguel found another job at a safer restaurant, and whenever he stopped by, he brought flowers, roses, always roses, reminding me of the night petals turned black. And fate shifted in my favor. As for Lily, she avoided me in public, her reputation shattered, though she escaped prison. We crossed paths once at the cemetery where our grandfather lay. She stood pale and thin, her hands clutching a bouquet of lilies, and when her eyes met mine, they held no hatred, only emptiness. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The chasm between us was too wide to ever bridge. 1 year after the trial, I stood in the kitchen of my new home's sunlight streaming through wide windows, Ethan tugging at my sleeve with a book in his hand. "Read to me, Mommy," he asked, his voice bright. I lifted him into my lap and opened the worn pages, my voice steady as the words carried us both into worlds untouched by betrayal. And in that moment, I understood what healing truly meant. It wasn't forgetting the scars or erasing the pain. It was choosing every day to build something stronger on top of them, to give my son the love I had been denied, to honor my grandfather's belief that true legacy isn't in wealth, but in how we treat each other. I closed the book when Ethan drifted to sleep against my shoulder, his breath warm, his face peaceful, and I whispered into the quiet, "I did it, Grandpa. I broke free."